Colorado Territory, 1875. The wind carried whispers across the town of Pine Creek just as surely as it carried dust. Today those whispers followed Dahlia Fairchild, the 22-year-old dressmaker's daughter who stood a full 6 inches taller than most men in town and carried herself with a quiet dignity that only made her more conspicuous. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a practical bun as she walked with purpose down the main street, her blue calico dress, sewn by her own skilled hands, doing little to diminish her statuesque presence. "Too big for a proper lady," Mrs. Hanover muttered as Dahlia passed the general store. "Too tall for any man to court," another woman whispered in agreement. Dahlia had grown accustomed to such comments. At nearly 6 feet tall, she towered over most women and matched height with many men. Her size had become her identity in Pine Creek, not her gentle nature, nor her skill with a needle, nor the way she taught Sunday school with patience and kindness. Just her height, a fact as unchangeable as the mountains that ringed their valley. A woman should be dainty enough for a man to protect, her mother often lamented, as if Dahlia had willfully chosen to grow so tall. No respectable man wants to look up to his wife. Dahlia believed her mother was right. After all, she'd been of marriageable age for years now, yet had received not a single serious suitor. At 22, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood, to a life helping in her father's dress shop, to watching other women her age marry and start families while she remained alone. The frontier was no place for oddities, she had concluded. Survival here required conformity, and she could never conform to what a frontier bride should be. Tucker O'Malley wiped sweat from his brow as he dismounted from his horse. At 25, he'd worked cattle for nearly a decade, his lean frame hardened by years of physical labor. The young cowboy's clean-shaven face was tanned from endless days under the open sky, his hazel eyes sharp as they surveyed Pine Creek's dusty Main Street. The cattle drive had been successful, and as foreman, Tucker had earned a handsome bonus. Now he intended to spend some of it on new clothes before returning to the Diamond K Ranch where he'd worked for 3 years. He'd risen quickly through the ranks, respected for his work ethic, horse sense, and calm demeanor even in crisis. "See you at the saloon later," called one of his fellow drovers as they dispersed into town. Tucker nodded but knew he wouldn't join them. Unlike most cowboys who blew their earnings on whiskey, cards, and company, Tucker saved his money. He had a dream, a small spread of his own someday, independence from wages and bosses. It was a lonely path, but the frontier had taught him that relying on others was a risk he couldn't afford. His parents had died of fever when he was 14, leaving him alone to make his way. The lesson had been clear: attachment only led to pain. A man makes his own way, he often told himself. No need for entanglements. He tied his horse and headed toward the mercantile. What he truly wanted was land, security, self-reliance. What he told no one was the emptiness that sometimes overwhelmed him on cold nights alone beneath the stars, the whisper that perhaps there was more to life than survival. Inside Fairchild's dress shop and mercantile, Dahlia carefully measured fabric for Mrs. Peterson, who needed new dresses for her twin daughters. "Make sure they're identical," the woman instructed. "But with different colored ribbons so we can tell them apart." Dahlia smiled. "Of course, the blue ribbon will complement Martha's eyes beautifully." The bell above the door jingled and both women turned. Tucker O'Malley stepped inside, removing his hat as propriety demanded. Dahlia immediately recognized him as one of the cowboys who'd driven cattle through last season, the quiet one who didn't carouse with the others. She had noticed him then, though she doubted he'd noticed her. "I'll be with you shortly, sir," she called, returning her attention to Mrs. Peterson. Tucker nodded and began examining the men's ready-made shirts displayed on a table. He needed practical clothing, not fancy duds. The Diamond K required function over form. When Mrs. Peterson finally departed, Dahlia approached the cowboy. Standing before him, she realized they were nearly the same height, perhaps the first time she'd ever looked directly into a man's eyes without having to lower her gaze. "May I help you?" she asked. Tucker looked up, momentarily startled by her height. But unlike the discomfort or mockery Dahlia usually saw in men's eyes, his expression held only mild surprise before settling into something more appreciative. "Need some new shirts, work shirts, and maybe one decent one for Sundays," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "Of course, we have cotton shirts that stand up well to ranch work." She gestured toward a shelf. "What size do you need?" Tucker's lips quirked into a half-smile. "I reckon we're about the same size, ma'am." The comment wasn't mocking, just a simple observation. Dahlia felt her cheeks warm slightly. Most men in town pretended not to notice her height, as if it were shameful to acknowledge. "You have a good eye for measurement," she replied, selecting several shirts. "Are you with the cattle drive that came through yesterday?" "Yes, ma'am." Tucker O'Malley, foreman for the Diamond K. He offered his hand, which she shook briefly. "Dahlia Fairchild, my father owns this shop." Their conversation remained polite and professional as she helped him select shirts, trousers, and a few other necessities. What Dahlia didn't notice was how Tucker's eyes followed her movements, noting the grace with which she carried herself despite her height, the clever way her fingers moved as she wrapped his purchases. What Tucker didn't realize was how refreshing Dahlia found his direct gaze, his treatment of her as simply a woman rather than a curiosity. As he paid for his purchases, their fingers brushed momentarily. Tucker felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Dahlia's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed herself, counting out his change with practiced efficiency. "Will you be staying in Pine Creek long?" she asked, the question emerging before she could consider its propriety. "Just tonight, we head back to the ranch tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "Though I'll likely be back in town next month when we deliver more cattle." Dahlia nodded, tamping down an inexplicable disappointment. "Safe travels then, Mr. O'Malley." Tucker settled his hat back on his head. "Miss Fairchild." With a slight tip of his hat he departed, packages tucked under his arm. Neither could have guessed how a chance lightning strike the following day would change everything. The storm broke suddenly the next morning as Tucker and the other drovers prepared to leave town. Lightning split the sky, sending the already nervous cattle into a panic. The entire herd began to stampede directly toward Pine Creek's main street. Tucker's training took over as he shouted orders, directing cowboys to turn the herd. But one bolt struck so close it spooked his horse, throwing him hard to the ground. Pain exploded in his leg as he tried to rise, broken almost certainly. Thunder crashed overhead. The cattle were heading straight for town, straight for destruction and potentially death for anyone in their path. Tucker dragged himself to his feet, tried to put weight on his injured leg, and collapsed again with a cry of pain. In town, the distant rumble grew louder. Dahlia, opening the shop for the day, stepped onto the porch and froze at the sight before her, hundreds of cattle bearing down on Pine Creek, with only a handful of cowboys trying desperately to turn them. People began to emerge from buildings, pointing in horror. Panic rippled through the gathered townspeople. "Everyone inside," Sheriff Mills bellowed, drawing his pistol, though it would do little good against a stampeding herd. Dahlia was about to retreat when she spotted a figure on the ground in the distance, a man struggling to rise, directly in the path of the oncoming cattle. Without thinking, she hitched up her skirts and ran toward the prone figure, ignoring shouts behind her. Tucker looked up to see a tall woman in a blue dress racing toward him. For a moment he thought he might be hallucinating from pain. "Miss Fairchild," he gasped as she reached him. "Can you stand?" Dahlia demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Legs broken, you need to get out of here." "No time," she interrupted, bending down and with surprising strength helping him to his feet. She ducked under his arm, taking his weight against her side. "Lean on me." Together they moved as quickly as possible toward the nearest building, the blacksmith shop with its sturdy stone walls. The ground trembled beneath them, the thunder of hooves growing deafening. Tucker knew they wouldn't make it, the cattle were too close too fast. "Leave me," he urged. "Save yourself." "Not a chance, mister." O'Malley, Dahlia replied, her jaw set in determination. They stumbled the final yards to the blacksmith's as the first cattle thundered past. Dahlia practically dragged Tucker inside, both of them collapsing against the wall as the herd streamed by outside, shaking the very foundations of the building. In the dim interior, they clung to each other, breathing hard. Tucker suddenly realized how strong this woman truly was, how she had carried him when he couldn't walk, how her height and strength had saved his life when a smaller woman couldn't have managed it. "You risked your life," he said when he could speak again. Dahlia's face was flushed from exertion, tendrils of blonde hair escaping her normally neat bun. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Tucker said firmly. "They wouldn't have." Their eyes met in the half-light, an understanding passing between them that transcended words. For the first time in years, Tucker felt the walls he'd built around his heart waver. The blacksmith, Jonas Harvey, bustled over to examine Tucker's leg. "Broken, sure enough. You're lucky this young lady saw you, O'Malley." Lucky indeed, Tucker thought, watching Dahlia tear strips from her petticoat to help Jonas fashion a temporary splint. Lucky in ways he was only beginning to understand. Word of Dahlia's bravery spread through Pine Creek like wildfire. By midday, half the town had stopped by the doctor's office where Tucker had been taken, ostensibly to check on the injured cowboy, but really to hear firsthand about the tall dressmaker's daughter who had saved him from certain death. She carried him, Mrs. Hanover asked incredulously. A proper lady doesn't do such things. Would you rather she let him die? Sheriff Mills countered. Seems to me her size was a blessing today, not something to gossip about. For once, Mrs. Hanover had no response. Dr. Wilson set Tucker's leg and declared he would need at least 6 weeks of rest before he could ride again. You can't possibly travel back to the Diamond K in this condition, the doctor pronounced. The ranch foreman Hank Peterson reluctantly agreed. We'll have to leave you behind, O'Malley. I'll explain to the boss. You can catch up when you're healed. Tucker's stomach sank. 6 weeks in a town where he knew no one, with no way to earn his keep. The doctor's fees would eat through his savings, the very money he'd been putting aside for his own ranch someday. He can stay at the boarding house, Mrs. Wilson, the doctor's wife, suggested. Though it's $3 a week plus meals. Tucker did quick calculations in his head. Between doctor's fees, room, and board, he'd lose most of his hard-earned savings before he could return to work. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Dahlia entered, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I brought some food, she said, and fresh bandages from the mercantile. Tucker straightened on the examination table, suddenly conscious of his disheveled appearance. Miss Fairchild, I didn't expect. Nonsense, she interrupted with a small smile. It's the least I could do. Mrs. Wilson clucked her tongue. We were just trying to figure out where Mr. O'Malley will stay during his recovery. 6 weeks is a long time. Dahlia set down her basket. My father has a room above the shop. It's small, but it's clean and comfortable. Mr. O'Malley is welcome to use it, at no charge, of course. It's the least we can do after he helped save the town from the stampede. Tucker blinked in surprise. I can't accept charity, Miss Fairchild. It's not charity, she replied firmly. It's payment for your service to Pine Creek. Besides, you'll be right above the shop. If you're feeling up to it, you might help with some of the heavier work father can no longer manage with his arthritis. Before Tucker could protest further, Dr. Wilson clapped his hands together. An excellent solution. Dahlia, your father agrees to this arrangement. He suggested it, she said, though in truth, she had been the one to propose the idea to her hesitant father, who had eventually relented. Tucker looked from the doctor to Dahlia, realizing he had few options. I'm much obliged for your kindness, Miss Fairchild. I promise I won't be a burden. I know you won't, she replied, their eyes meeting briefly before she lowered her gaze. Father and I will prepare the room. Dr. Wilson can send word when you're ready to be moved. After Dahlia departed, Mrs. Wilson gave Tucker a knowing look. That girl is worth her weight in gold, height and all. Never understood why the men in this town are too foolish to see it. Tucker said nothing, but her words echoed in his mind. He had always prided himself on seeing what others missed. It was what made him a good foreman, a good horseman. Now he wondered what else about Dahlia Fairchild the town had failed to appreciate. That evening, Tucker was installed in the small but tidy room above Fairchild's dress shop and mercantile. Mr. Fairchild, a slight man with thinning hair and kind eyes, had welcomed him warmly. My Dahlia says you're a hero, the older man said, helping Tucker settle into a chair by the window that overlooked the main street. Tucker shook his head. Your daughter's the hero, sir. She saved my life today. Mr. Fairchild's eyes crinkled with a smile. She's something special, my Dahlia, too special for this town to appreciate, I fear. The door opened as Dahlia entered with a tray of food. Father, you're embarrassing me, she chided gently. Mr. O'Malley isn't interested in your fatherly pride. On the contrary, Tucker said, his eyes meeting hers, I find it entirely justified. A blush colored Dahlia's cheeks as she set down the tray. It's just a simple stew, but Mother says it's good for healing. Smells wonderful, Tucker replied. I can't remember the last time I had a home-cooked meal. Trail food gets mighty tiresome. Well, you'll have 6 weeks of home cooking now, she said, arranging his pillows so he could sit more comfortably. Dr. Wilson says you're to stay off that leg completely for at least 2 weeks. Tucker suppressed a groan. 2 weeks of complete immobility would drive him mad. He was accustomed to days in the saddle, to constant movement and purpose. As if reading his thoughts, Dahlia added, I've brought some books if you'd like to read, and Father says he'll teach you cribbage if you're interested." "That's very thoughtful," Tucker said, genuinely touched by their efforts to make his convalescence bearable. Mr. Fairchild patted his daughter's shoulder. "Come, Dahlia, let the man eat in peace. We've work to finish before closing." After they left, Tucker stared out the window at Pine Creek's Main Street. He had passed through this town a dozen times, never staying longer than a night, never noticing much beyond the saloon and general store. Now, forced to remain, he found himself wondering what else, and who else, he might discover here. The sound of Dahlia's laughter drifted up from the shop below, light and musical. Tucker smiled despite himself. Maybe this unexpected delay wouldn't be so terrible after all. Days passed and Tucker found himself falling into the rhythm of life at Fairchild's. Though confined to his room at first, he soon began to venture downstairs, hopping carefully on his good leg with the aid of crutches Dr. Wilson had provided. Mr. Fairchild welcomed his help with inventory and accounts, tasks Tucker performed with surprising aptitude given his limited formal education. "You have a head for figures," the older man remarked one afternoon as Tucker totaled a column of numbers. "Unusual for a cowboy." Tucker shrugged, had to learn, can't run cattle without knowing what they're worth. "Planning to have your own spread someday?" "Yes, sir, been saving for years." Mr. Fairchild nodded approvingly, a man with ambition. "Admirable." What neither man mentioned was Dahlia's presence in the shop, the way Tucker's eyes followed her as she waited on customers, the way her cheeks flushed when she caught him looking. There was a growing awareness between them, a tentative connection neither quite acknowledged. The townsfolk noticed too. Women who came to shop lingered longer than necessary, watching the interactions between the tall dressmaker's daughter and the handsome cowboy. Gossip began to circulate, some sympathetic, some skeptical. "He'll leave as soon as his leg heals," Mrs. Hanover predicted confidently to anyone who would listen. "Cowboys never settle, especially not with women like Dahlia Fairchild. Too much woman for any man." Dahlia pretended not to hear such talk, but each whisper stung. She knew better than to hope Tucker saw her as anything more than the woman who had saved his life, who now helped care for him during his recovery. A woman might nurture foolish dreams, but the practical reality was that he would heal and ride away, leaving Pine Creek and her behind. Yet sometimes, in quiet moments, she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, something warm and considering that made her heart beat faster. Those moments sustained her even as she tried to guard her heart against inevitable disappointment. 3 weeks into Tucker's stay, the spring dance was announced, an annual tradition in Pine Creek where couples gathered in the town hall for music, refreshments, and socializing. "You should attend, Dahlia," her mother urged as they prepared dinner. "You're still young, there might be someone suitable there." Dahlia concentrated on kneading bread dough. "We both know no one will ask me to dance, Mother." "I'll only be embarrassed." Mrs. Fairchild sighed, "If only you weren't so." "Tall," Dahlia finished for her. "I can't help how God made me." "I was going to say stubborn," her mother replied. "You shy away from these gatherings before even giving them a chance." "Because experience has taught me what to expect," Dahlia said quietly. "I'll stay home and read." Later that evening, as Dahlia brought Tucker his dinner tray, she found him attempting to stand without his crutches, wincing as he put weight on his healing leg. "Mr. O'Malley," she exclaimed. "Dr. Wilson said another week before you should try walking." Tucker grimaced but lowered himself back into his chair. "A man gets restless, Miss Fairchild." She set down his tray and frowned at him. "A man gets foolish, more like." "You'll only delay your recovery." A smile tugged at his lips. "Anyone ever tell you you'd make a formidable nurse?" "Anyone ever tell you cowboys make terrible patients?" she countered, but she was smiling too. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Tucker cleared his throat. "I heard folks talking about a dance coming up." Dahlia busied herself straightening his blankets. "Yes, the spring dance. A Pine Creek tradition." "Will you be attending?" His voice was casual, but his eyes watched her intently. She shook her head. "No, I don't care for such gatherings." "Don't care for dancing." "Don't care for standing along the wall while others dance," she corrected, then immediately regretted her honesty. "I find that hard to believe," Tucker interrupted. "Surely the men of Pine Creek aren't blind as well as foolish." Dahlia stared at him, uncertain how to respond to what sounded remarkably like a compliment. You don't understand, in Pine Creek I'm too tall, he guessed, his expression softening. Miss Fairchild, Dahlia, where I come from, we value strength and capability in our women. The frontier doesn't suffer weakness gladly. And yet, even on the frontier, there are expectations about what a proper woman should be, she replied. I've never fit those expectations. Tucker's gaze was steady. Perhaps you've been holding yourself to the wrong standards. Before Dahlia could respond, her mother called from downstairs. With a murmured excuse, she fled the room, her heart hammering in her chest. That night, for the first time in years, she found herself wondering what it might be like to attend the dance, not as an object of pity or ridicule, but as a woman worthy of admiration. A woman like the one she glimpsed in Tucker O'Malley's eyes. The next day brought unexpected visitors to Fairchild's, Clementine Walsh and her mother, the wealthiest residents of Pine Creek. Mrs. Walsh swept into the shop with an air of importance, her daughter trailing behind. We require a new dress for Clementine, Mrs. Walsh announced, for the spring dance, something that will complement her delicate figure. Clementine, petite and pretty at 19, offered Dahlia a sympathetic smile. They had been schoolmates once, though never close friends. Of course, Dahlia replied professionally. Did you have a specific color in mind? As the women discussed fabrics and styles, Tucker made his way carefully down the stairs on his crutches. He had taken to spending more time in the shop, ostensibly to help Mr. Fairchild but increasingly to be near Dahlia. Mrs. Walsh's eyes lit up at the sight of him. Mr. O'Malley. I heard you were staying with the Fairchilds during your recovery. How fortunate that Dahlia happened to be nearby during that terrible stampede. Fortunate indeed, Tucker agreed, nodding politely to both women. Miss Fairchild saved my life. Clementine stepped forward. You must be dreadfully bored, confined to town after life on the range. Will you attend the spring dance, Mr. O'Malley? It would be a welcome diversion, I'm sure. Tucker glanced at Dahlia, who had suddenly become very interested in measuring ribbon. I hadn't given it much thought, Miss Walsh. Oh, you must come, Clementine insisted. I could introduce you to everyone. Pine Creek may be small, but we do know how to enjoy ourselves. That's very kind, Tucker replied noncommittally. Mrs. Walsh smiled indulgently at her daughter. Clementine is quite the belle of Pine Creek, Mr. O'Malley. Every young man wishes to dance with her. Mother, Clementine protested, though her expression suggested she didn't entirely disagree. Dahlia continued working silently, her face carefully neutral as she recorded measurements in her notebook. Tucker watched her, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, the deliberate way she avoided looking at their visitors. Will you be attending the dance, Miss Fairchild? He asked suddenly. All eyes turned to Dahlia. She looked up, startled. I don't believe so. Mrs. Walsh made a small noise that might have been sympathy, but sounded more like satisfaction. Dahlia rarely attends our social gatherings. She's always so busy with the shop. A pity, Tucker said, his eyes still on Dahlia. I imagine you dance as gracefully as you sew, Miss Fairchild. A blush crept up Dahlia's cheeks. Mrs. Walsh looked scandalized while Clementine's eyes widened in surprise. You're very kind, Mr. O'Malley, Dahlia managed to say. Now, Miss Walsh, shall we discuss the trim for your gown? After the Walshes departed, having ordered an elaborate dress that would require many hours of work, Tucker lingered by Dahlia's cutting table. Did I speak out of turn? He asked quietly. Dahlia concentrated on sorting fabric. You needn't feel obligated to include me in conversations out of politeness, Mr. O'Malley. Politeness had nothing to do with it, he replied. I simply spoke the truth as I see it. She looked up then, her blue eyes searching his face. The Walshes represent everything Pine Creek values: wealth, delicacy, proper feminine behavior. Clementine will make someone a perfect frontier wife. Perfect by whose measure? Tucker challenged. Out where I've worked, a woman needs substance, not just appearance, intelligence, not just manners. Strength of character, not just a pretty face. You speak as if those qualities are mutually exclusive, Dahlia said. Clementine may be petite, but she's not without substance. Tucker nodded, acknowledging her point. Fair enough. But neither should a woman's height determine her worth, especially not on the frontier where practical matters often outweigh social conventions. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of new customers, but Tucker's words lingered in Dahlia's mind throughout the day. She had spent so long accepting the town's judgment of her that she'd never considered there might be different standards, places where her height might be valued rather than mocked, where strength was admired rather than considered unfeminine. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder what life might be like beyond Pine Creek's limiting boundaries. That evening, Tucker joined the Fairchild family for dinner, a new routine that had developed as his mobility improved. Mrs. Fairchild had initially been hesitant about having a cowboy at their table, but had gradually warmed to Tucker's courteous manners and thoughtful conversation. "The Walshes ordered a dance dress today, Mrs. Fairchild remarked as they passed dishes around the table. "Clementine will look lovely in that blue silk." "Dahlia's handiwork will ensure that," Mr. Fairchild said proudly. "No finer seamstress in 3 counties." Dahlia smiled at her father's praise. "The design is simple, it will be finished well before the dance." "It's a shame you won't attend," her mother sighed. 22 years old and hiding away from society. "I'm not hiding, Mother," Dahlia replied evenly. "I simply choose not to put myself in situations where I'll be uncomfortable." Tucker set down his fork. "I've been thinking about the dance myself," he said casually. "Dr. Wilson says I should be walking without crutches by then, though dancing might be ambitious." Mr. Fairchild nodded. "Your leg is healing well." "Doctor seemed pleased at your last examination." "He was," Tucker agreed. "So I was wondering, Miss Fairchild, if you might consider attending the dance with me." Silence fell over the table. Dahlia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "The dance," Tucker repeated, his gaze steady despite the color rising in his cheeks. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me? As my way of thanking you for all your family has done during my recovery." Mrs. Fairchild's mouth fell open. Mr. Fairchild looked from Tucker to his daughter, eyebrows raised in surprise. "You're asking me to the spring dance?" Dahlia clarified, her voice faint. Tucker smiled. "Yes, ma'am, I am. But you'll still be recovering. You said yourself that dancing might be too much." "I can manage standing and sitting just fine. And perhaps one dance, if you're willing to tolerate my clumsy steps." Dahlia hesitated, torn between hope and suspicion. Was this merely gratitude, as he suggested, or worse, pity? "Mr. O'Malley, you needn't feel obligated." "Dahlia," her father interrupted gently. "The young man is asking you to a dance. The proper response is either yes or no." She met Tucker's eyes across the table, searching for any sign of insincerity. What she saw instead was warmth and something that looked remarkably like admiration. "Yes," she said finally, her heart pounding. "I would be honored to accompany you, Mr. O'Malley." Tucker's smile broadened. "Excellent. And since we'll be attending a social event together, perhaps you might consider calling me Tucker." "Tucker," she repeated, the name feeling strange and wonderful on her lips. "And you must call me Dahlia." "Mrs." Fairchild cleared her throat, looking slightly dazed by this turn of events. "Well, in that case we must ensure you have a proper dress, Dahlia, something new and fashionable." "Mother, I can make my own dress," Dahlia protested. "Nonsense. You'll be too busy with Miss Walsh's gown and other orders. I'll help you." She looked at Tucker appraisingly. "What color is your Sunday suit, Mr. O'Malley?" As her parents and Tucker discussed appropriate attire, Dahlia sat in stunned silence. After years of rejection and isolation, after resigning herself to standing apart, she was going to the spring dance, with arguably the most handsome man who had ever passed through Pine Creek. For the first time in a very long time, Dahlia dared to hope that perhaps there was a place for her after all. News of Tucker's invitation spread through Pine Creek like a prairie fire. By the following afternoon, it seemed everyone in town had an opinion on the matter. "A pity invitation, obviously," Mrs. Hanover declared to anyone who would listen. "The poor man feels indebted after she saved him." Others weren't so certain. "Have you seen the way he looks at her?" Mrs. Peterson countered. "That's not pity in his eyes." Dahlia did her best to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on completing Clementine's dress and designing her own. Despite her mother's offer of help, Dahlia had insisted on creating her own gown, a rich emerald green that complemented her fair coloring. "Not blue," her mother had questioned when Dahlia selected the fabric. "Green suits me better," Dahlia replied with newfound confidence, "and it's different from what everyone else will wear." As she worked, Tucker continued to improve, gradually setting aside his crutches for a walking stick. Dr. Wilson pronounced him ahead of schedule in his recovery. "Good clean living at the Fairchilds," Tucker told the doctor with a grin, better than trail dust and cowboy coffee. What he didn't say was how much he had come to enjoy the routine of life with the Fairchilds, the family meals, the quiet evenings playing cribbage with Mr. Fairchild, and most of all, the growing closeness with Dahlia. Their conversations ranged from books they had read to stories of Tucker's adventures on cattle drives to Dahlia's dreams of someday visiting Denver or even Chicago. "Have you never wanted to leave Pine Creek?" he asked one evening as they sat on the shop's back porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. Dahlia considered the question seriously. "I've thought about it, especially when I was younger and the teasing was at its worst, but this is my home, my family is here." "And if your family weren't a consideration?" She glanced at him, wondering at the purpose behind his question. "I suppose I'd like to see more of the world before settling somewhere people might see me for who I am, not just," she gestured at her height. "Not just your size," Tucker finished for her. "Though I hope you know that's one of the things I admire about you." Dahlia blinked in surprise. "You admire my height?" "I admire everything it represents," he clarified. "Your strength, your capability. The way you carry yourself with dignity despite what others say." His words left her momentarily speechless. Finally, she murmured, "No one has ever spoken to me that way before." Tucker's gaze was steady. "Then no one has truly seen you, Dahlia." In that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since the day she had carried him to safety. Dahlia felt her heart expand with dangerous hope. 3 days before the dance, disaster struck. Clementine Walsh arrived for a final fitting of her gown, only to discover that despite Dahlia's careful measurements, the dress was unmistakably too small. "I don't understand," Dahlia said, examining the seams in confusion. "These are the exact measurements we took." Clementine's face flushed with embarrassment. "Perhaps that is, Mother insisted I wear my corset especially tight for the fitting, to show my best figure. But I can't possibly wear it that tight for an entire evening of dancing." Dahlia suppressed a sigh. This was a common enough problem with younger clients, though usually discovered earlier in the process. "Don't worry. I can adjust the seams to give you more room. It will require taking apart some of the work, but the dress will be ready in time." Relief washed over Clementine's face. "Oh, thank you. Mother would be so disappointed if my dress weren't perfect. Everyone will be looking at me, especially now that I'll be dancing with David Mitchell. He finally asked me yesterday." "That's wonderful," Dahlia said sincerely. "David seems like a fine young man." As she pinned the necessary adjustments, Clementine chattered about her expectations for the dance. "Of course, everyone is talking about you attending with Mr. O'Malley. It's caused quite a stir." Dahlia kept her expression neutral. "I imagine it has. Some people are saying unkind things," Clementine continued, seemingly oblivious to how her words might affect Dahlia. "But I told Mother I think it's wonderful. Mr. O'Malley seems very nice. And he's so handsome, though I suppose he'll be leaving once his leg is fully healed." "Yes," Dahlia replied, her stomach tightening at the reminder. "He'll return to the Diamond K." "Still, it's romantic, isn't it? Being rescued by a beautiful woman, falling in love during his recovery, just like in a novel." Dahlia's hands stilled. "Clementine, Mr. O'Malley and I are not. That is, he invited me to the dance out of gratitude, nothing more." Clementine's eyes widened. "Oh, but the way he looks at you, I just assumed." "We've become friends," Dahlia said firmly. "That's all." But after Clementine departed, Dahlia found herself dwelling on the young woman's words. Was it possible that others saw something in Tucker's behavior toward her that she was too afraid to acknowledge? Or was it merely the town's love of gossip, manufacturing a romantic tale where none existed? That evening, she worked late into the night on Clementine's alterations, postponing work on her own dress. The modifications were extensive, requiring her to disassemble and reconstruct significant portions of the bodice. By the time she finished, it was well past midnight. Exhausted, she draped her own half-completed gown over her sewing form and went to bed, planning to rise early to continue work on it. But fate had other plans. The following morning, Mrs. Peterson arrived in a panic. Her husband had been thrown from his horse and broken his arm. The doctor had been forced to cut away his best shirt to set the bone, and now he needed a new one before church on Sunday. "I know it's last minute, Mrs. Peterson apologized, but you're the only one who can help." With Clementine's dress complete but her own barely started, Dahlia made the only decision she could. Of course I'll make Mr. Peterson a new shirt. Family must come first. For the next 2 days, Dahlia worked frantically, completing Mr. Peterson's shirt and attempting to finish her own dress in the limited time remaining. But as the hours ticked away, it became increasingly clear that her gown would not be ready in time for the dance. The night before the event, she finally admitted defeat. Laying aside the half-finished emerald fabric, she went downstairs to where Tucker sat reading by the fire. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly, her heart heavy. He looked up, his smile fading as he noted her expression. "What's wrong?" "I won't be able to attend the dance tomorrow," she explained, detailing the circumstances that had prevented her from completing her dress. "I'm so sorry, I know you were looking forward to it." Tucker studied her face. Is the dress the only reason, or is there something else? Dahlia hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you using this as an excuse because you've changed your mind about attending with me?" "No," she exclaimed, "not at all. I was looking forward to it more than you know, but I can't possibly go without a proper dress. Everyone will be watching us, expecting me to embarrass myself, and you by association." Tucker set aside his book and stood, moving closer to her. "Dahlia, do you truly want to go to this dance?" "Yes," she whispered. "But—" "Then wear whatever dress you have," he said simply. "I'm not asking you to the dance because of what you'll be wearing, I'm asking because I want to spend the evening with you." Dahlia shook her head. "You don't understand. In Pine Creek, appearances matter. I've been an oddity my entire life. For once, I wanted to attend a social event without feeling like everyone was staring at me for the wrong reasons." Tucker took her hand, his touch gentle. "I understand better than you think, but consider this: people will stare regardless of what you wear. The question is, will you let their stares dictate your choices?" His words struck her deeply. How many opportunities had she declined, how many experiences had she avoided, all because she feared the town's judgment? "I have my Sunday dress," she said slowly. "It's 3 years old and the style is outdated, but it's presentable." Tucker smiled, squeezing her hand. "Then that's what you'll wear, and you'll be the most beautiful woman at the dance, regardless." Dahlia wasn't entirely convinced, but as she met Tucker's earnest gaze, she found herself nodding. "All right, we'll go to the dance." It wasn't until later, lying in bed, that she realized Tucker had never once, in all their conversations, made her feel awkward about her height. In fact, he seemed to see it as an asset rather than a liability, a revelation that kept her awake far longer than concerns about her outdated dress. The night of the spring dance arrived clear and mild, with a crescent moon hanging in a star-studded sky. Dahlia stood before her mirror, examining her reflection with critical eyes. Her blue Sunday dress was indeed out of fashion, with its modest bustle and simple trim, but it was well-made and becoming with her fair coloring and honey-blonde hair, which she had arranged in a more elaborate style than usual. "You look lovely," her mother said from the doorway, her expression a mixture of pride and concern, "though I still wish you'd had time to finish your new dress." "This will do," Dahlia replied with more confidence than she felt. "Tucker said the dress doesn't matter." Mrs. Fairchild's eyebrows rose at Dahlia's casual use of Tucker's first name. "He seems like a fine young man, different from the cowboys who usually pass through." "He is different," Dahlia agreed softly. Her mother stepped into the room, adjusting Dahlia's collar with maternal fussiness. "Just be careful, dear, he'll be leaving soon, I don't want to see you hurt." Dahlia nodded, understanding her mother's concern. Tucker had already been in Pine Creek longer than planned due to his injury. Once fully healed, he would return to the Diamond K or perhaps move on entirely, pursuing his dream of his own ranch. Either way, his future lay elsewhere. "I know he's leaving," she assured her mother. "This is just one evening." But as she descended the stairs to where Tucker waited in the parlor, Dahlia knew she was lying to herself. Her feelings for him had grown far beyond what was wise for a temporary visitor. Tucker stood as she entered, his eyes widening in appreciation. He looked handsome in his best clothes, not fancy by Pine Creek standards, but clean and well-fitted, emphasizing his broad shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. His injured leg was hardly noticeable now, though he still carried a walking stick as a precaution. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his admiration evident. Dahlia smiled, her nervousness fading under his warm gaze. "Thank you, you look quite handsome yourself." Mr. Fairchild cleared his throat. "You young people should get going." Don't want to be late. Tucker offered his arm. Shall we, Miss Fairchild? With a deep breath, Dahlia placed her hand on his arm. Lead on, Mr. O'Malley. They walked slowly toward the town hall, mindful of Tucker's still healing leg. The spring air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers, and for a moment Dahlia allowed herself to pretend this was normal, that she was simply a young woman being escorted to a dance by a suitor, with no complications or uncertainties looming over them. Nervous, Tucker asked as they approached the brightly lit building. A little, she admitted. It's been years since I attended a dance. Just remember, you're doing me the favor by accompanying me. I'm the outsider here. His words made her smile, easing some of her tension. As they entered the hall, however, her anxiety returned full force. The music faltered briefly as heads turned in their direction, conversations pausing as people took in the sight of Dahlia Fairchild and Tucker O'Malley arriving together. Ignore them, Tucker murmured, patting her hand on his arm. They're just surprised to see how well we complement each other. Indeed, standing side by side, they made a striking pair, both tall and fair, moving with a natural grace that drew the eye. After the initial pause, the music resumed, and people returned to their conversations, though Dahlia could feel curious glances following them as Tucker led her through the crowd. They found seats along the wall where Tucker could rest his leg. Sheriff Mills approached, nodding in greeting. O'Malley, Miss Fairchild, good to see you both here tonight. Wouldn't have missed it, Tucker replied cheerfully. Pine Creek knows how to celebrate, it seems. That we do. The sheriff smiled at Dahlia. Your father mentioned you'd be attending. It's good to see you out and about, Miss Fairchild. As the sheriff moved on, other townspeople stopped to exchange pleasantries, some genuine, others clearly curious about the unexpected pairing. Dahlia gradually relaxed as the initial awkwardness faded, especially when Clementine Walsh approached with David Mitchell. Dahlia, the alterations are perfect, Clementine exclaimed, twirling to display her blue silk gown. Mother is absolutely delighted. Thank you again for accommodating me at the last minute. You look beautiful, Dahlia replied sincerely. The color suits you perfectly. Clementine beamed, then leaned closer to whisper, and you look lovely too. Mr. O'Malley can't take his eyes off you. Before Dahlia could respond, the musicians began a lively Virginia reel. David led Clementine onto the dance floor, where couples were forming lines. Tucker turned to Dahlia. I'm afraid I can't manage anything too energetic yet, but perhaps later they'll play something slower. Of course, she said, secretly relieved. Though she knew the steps, it had been so long since she'd danced that she welcomed the chance to observe first. They watched as couples moved through the formations, the women's skirts swirling, laughter rising above the music. Despite her initial trepidation, Dahlia found herself enjoying the atmosphere, the decorations of spring flowers, the cheerful music, the sense of community that pervaded the gathering. When the musicians finally struck up a waltz, Tucker stood and offered his hand. May I have this dance, Miss Fairchild? Dahlia hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. Are you certain your leg? Dr. Wilson said gentle exercise would be beneficial, he assured her, and there's nothing I'd rather do right now than waltz with you. They moved onto the floor, joining several other couples. As Tucker placed his hand lightly at her waist, Dahlia was acutely aware of their similar height. How easily they fit together, how natural it felt to look directly into his eyes without tilting her head up or him looking down. You dance beautifully, Tucker murmured as they began to move in time with the music. So do you, she replied, surprised at his skill. I wouldn't have expected a cowboy to waltz so well. He smiled. My mother taught me before she passed. Said a gentleman should know how to dance properly, regardless of his profession. She taught you well. They moved in perfect harmony, their steps matching as if they had danced together for years. Dahlia gradually became aware of the stares they were attracting, not mocking or pitying, but curious and even admiring. For once, she didn't mind the attention. With Tucker's hand warm at her waist and his eyes never leaving hers, she felt not too tall or too large, but exactly right. As the waltz ended, Tucker winced slightly, reminding Dahlia of his injury. We should sit down, your leg needs rest. He nodded reluctantly, allowing her to lead him back to their seats. Worth every twinge, he assured her with a smile that made her heart flutter. Throughout the evening, they danced twice more, both slower numbers that didn't tax Tucker's healing leg. Between dances, they talked and laughed, shared refreshments, and greeted townspeople who stopped to chat. Gradually, Dahlia noticed a shift in how people approached her, a new respect in their eyes, a warming in their manner. "People are looking at me differently tonight," she observed quietly. Tucker's expression was thoughtful. "Perhaps they're finally seeing what I've seen all along." "And what's that?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the music. "A woman of remarkable grace, strength, and beauty," he replied simply. "A woman any man would be proud to stand beside." Dahlia felt her cheeks flush with pleasure. "You have a silver tongue, Tucker O'Malley." "Just an honest one." His eyes held hers, serious now despite the festive surroundings. "Dahlia, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." But before he could continue, Mrs. Walsh appeared before them, her expression a careful mask of politeness. "Miss Fairchild, Mr. O'Malley, I hope you're enjoying the evening." "Very much, ma'am," Tucker replied, standing respectfully despite his leg. Mrs. Walsh's gaze swept over Dahlia's outdated dress, her lips thinning slightly. "I understand you were too busy with Clementine's alterations to complete your own new gown. So dedicated to your work, admirable, though perhaps not practical for social occasions." The subtle barb stung, but Dahlia maintained her composure. "Clementine looks lovely tonight." "The blue silk was an excellent choice." "Yes, she does catch the eye, a perfect figure for fashionable gowns." Mrs. Walsh smiled tightly. "Mr. O'Malley, I understand you'll be returning to the Diamond K soon." "Pine Creek will be sorry to lose you." Tucker's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "I've enjoyed my stay here more than I expected, Mrs. Walsh. Pine Creek has many charms I hadn't appreciated during my previous brief visits." His eyes flicked to Dahlia as he spoke, and Mrs. Walsh's smile became even more strained. "How nice. Well, I must check on the refreshment table." "Good evening to you both." As she swept away, Dahlia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "She doesn't approve of me attending with you." Tucker reclaimed his seat beside her. "Her approval isn't required." "No," but Dahlia hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Tucker, what were you going to tell me?" before she interrupted. He studied her face for a long moment, then glanced around at the crowded hall. "Not here," he said finally. "Would you walk outside with me? I could use some fresh air." Curious and slightly apprehensive, Dahlia nodded. They made their way through the crowd and out onto the porch that wrapped around the town hall. The night air was cool but pleasant, scented with spring blossoms. A few other couples strolled nearby, seeking momentary respite from the warm, crowded hall. Tucker led her to a quieter corner of the porch, where a bench sat beneath a lantern. They settled side by side, the distant music creating a gentle backdrop to the night's stillness. "Dahlia," Tucker began, his voice soft but determined, "I need to be honest with you about something." Her heart quickened with anxiety. Was this the moment he would remind her that his stay in Pine Creek was temporary? That whatever had grown between them had no future? "I've been corresponding with my employer at the Diamond K," he continued, "explaining my situation and exploring some possibilities." "Possibilities?" she echoed, uncertain where this was leading. Tucker shifted to face her more directly. "When I first came to Pine Creek, I was just passing through another town on a cattle drive, nothing more. Then the stampede happened, and you saved my life." "Anyone would have." "No," he interrupted gently. "Not anyone. Your strength, your courage, they changed everything. And then living with your family, getting to know you. I've discovered something I never expected to find in Pine Creek." Dahlia's throat felt tight with emotion. "What's that?" Tucker took her hand, his touch warm and sure. "A reason to stop wandering. A person worth staying for." She stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying, Tucker?" "I'm saying that I care for you, Dahlia Fairchild, more than I thought possible in such a short time. And I'm asking if you might consider caring for me too, not just for now, but for a future together." Joy bloomed in Dahlia's heart, but caution quickly followed. "But your position at the Diamond K, your dreams of your own ranch someday." "Still very much alive," he assured her. "In fact, Mr. Kendrick, my employer, has offered me a partnership in a new venture. He's expanding his operation and wants me to oversee a second ranch property. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, and, most importantly, a permanent position with housing provided." "That's wonderful news," Dahlia said sincerely. "You deserve such recognition." "The property is just 3 hours' ride from Pine Creek," Tucker continued, his eyes never leaving hers. close enough that a man might court a certain dressmaker's daughter properly if she were amenable. Dahlia's breath caught. "Tucker, are you asking to court me?" "I am," he confirmed, squeezing her hand. "I know it may seem sudden. We've known each other only a few weeks. But sometimes, Dahlia, a person recognizes what truly matters more quickly than convention might allow." Tears of happiness pricked at her eyes. "And what matters to you?" "A woman who sees me as I am, not just as a cowboy passing through. A woman with the strength to carry a man to safety and the gentleness to nurse him back to health. A woman whose height matches her spirit, tall and proud and beautiful." His voice softened. "You matter to me, Dahlia, more than I can properly express." Overwhelmed with emotion, Dahlia could only nod at first. When she found her voice, it was thick with feeling. "I care for you too, Tucker, so much that it frightens me sometimes." His smile was radiant in the lantern light. "Then you'll allow me to court you?" "Properly, with your father's permission." "Yes," she whispered, "yes, I will." Tucker raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado Territory tonight." They sat together in contented silence for a moment, the reality of their new understanding settling around them like a comfortable blanket. Then from inside the hall, the music changed to a slow, romantic melody. Tucker stood and offered his hand once more. "One last dance before we return to the festivities." Here on the porch, with only the moon and stars as witnesses, Dahlia felt a new confidence as she placed her hand in his. "I would be honored." They moved together in the gentle glow of the lantern, their steps perfectly matched, their hearts beating in unison. For the first time in her life, Dahlia felt completely at home in her body, not too tall, not too big, but exactly as she was meant to be in the arms of a man who saw her true worth. In the weeks that followed the spring dance, Pine Creek witnessed a transformation. The once ridiculed Dahlia Fairchild, with her towering height and reserved manner, gradually emerged from her shell as Tucker O'Malley courted her openly and with evident admiration. Their courtship became the talk of the town, not with mockery, but with growing respect and even a touch of envy. They were seen walking together in the evenings, Tucker's leg improving daily. They attended church side by side, their heights complementary rather than awkward. They shared Sunday dinners with both the Fairchilds and other families in town who extended invitations, curious about the couple who had defied expectations. Mr. Fairchild had granted his blessing readily when Tucker formally requested permission to court Dahlia. "You're a good man, O'Malley," he had said, "and more importantly, you see my daughter's true worth." "That's all a father can ask." Even Mrs. Fairchild had come around, especially after learning of Tucker's promising position with the Diamond K's expansion. "A partnership with the Kendricks is nothing to dismiss," she remarked to her friends at the sewing circle. "They're one of the most respected ranching families in the territory." As for Dahlia herself, she bloomed under Tucker's attentions. Her confidence grew daily, reflected in her posture, her willingness to engage in town events, and even in her dressmaking, where she began to create more fashionable designs adapted specifically for women of different sizes. "I've been thinking," she told Tucker one evening as they sat on the porch swing behind the shop, "that perhaps there are other women like me, women who don't fit the conventional patterns. They deserve beautiful clothes too." Tucker smiled, his arm resting comfortably around her shoulders. "That sounds like a fine business opportunity. You could become known for it, specializing in garments for women of all sizes." "Do you really think there would be interest?" "I know there would be," he affirmed. "Not every woman is built like Clementine Walsh, thank goodness. The world needs variety, Dahlia. It's what makes life interesting." 6 weeks after the stampede, Dr. Wilson declared Tucker fully healed and fit for ranch work. The time had come for him to ride to the Diamond K to finalize arrangements for his new position overseeing the expansion property. "I'll be gone 2 weeks at most," he promised Dahlia the evening before his departure. "Just long enough to meet with Mr. Kendrick, sign the papers, and make arrangements to move my belongings." Dahlia nodded, fighting against the irrational fear that once he left Pine Creek, he might never return, that away from her, he would come to his senses and realize he could find a more suitable woman, one who didn't stand eye to eye with him. Tucker, reading her expression with the intuition that had developed between them, gently tilted her chin up. "I'll come back, Dahlia. Wild horses couldn't keep me away." "I know," she said, forcing a smile. "It's foolish to worry." "Not foolish, natural." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I was going to wait until I returned, but perhaps this is the better moment. From his pocket he withdrew a small silver ring set with a modest turquoise stone. This was my mother's, he explained, his voice soft with emotion. My father gave it to her when they decided to journey west together. It's not fancy, but it represents a promise, a commitment to building a life together, no matter what challenges the frontier might bring. Dahlia's eyes widened as she realized what he was offering. Tucker, I'm not asking for your answer now, he clarified quickly. That would be presumptuous after such a short courtship, but I want you to keep this while I'm gone, as tangible proof of my intentions and my promise to return. Tears blurred Dahlia's vision as she extended her hand, allowing Tucker to slip the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly as if made for her. When I return, Tucker continued, I'll speak to your father again, this time to ask for your hand properly, but I wanted you to know beyond any doubt that my heart is decided. I love you, Dahlia Fairchild, exactly as you are. I love you too, she whispered, the words emerging naturally, inevitably, and I'll be waiting when you return. Their kiss was tender and full of promise, not a goodbye, but a pledge of commitment that transcended temporary separation. The 2 weeks of Tucker's absence felt interminable to Dahlia, but she filled them with productive work. Inspired by their conversations, she began drafting patterns for women of various sizes, creating designs that would flatter different body types rather than trying to force all women into the same narrow ideal. What are you working on? Clementine Walsh asked one afternoon, stopping by the shop to order gloves. Dahlia showed her the sketches, dresses with strategic seeming to accentuate various figures, clever details that drew the eye to a woman's best features regardless of her size. These are wonderful, Clementine exclaimed with genuine admiration. So many women struggle to find patterns that suit them. Even I have difficulties sometimes. My shoulders are broader than is fashionable. Dahlia looked at her in surprise. I never noticed. Because I'm careful with my choices, Clementine explained, but not everyone knows how to adapt patterns to their bodies. Your designs could help many women feel beautiful. Their conversation sparked an unexpected friendship. Clementine, with her family's social connections, began spreading word about Dahlia's innovative approach to dressmaking. Soon women from neighboring towns were traveling to Pine Creek specifically to consult with Miss Fairchild, the dressmaker who creates for every figure. By the time Tucker returned, exactly when promised, astride a new horse and with papers confirming his partnership with the Diamond K, Dahlia had a growing business and a newfound respect in the community. You've been busy, he observed with pride after she'd shared her new venture over dinner with her parents. Your absence gave me time to think, she explained, about who I am, what I can offer. About how my difference, my height, might be a strength rather than a liability. Later, walking in the golden evening light, Tucker formally asked Dahlia to be his wife. Though the question was expected after his gift of the ring, the moment was no less emotional for its predictability. You've changed my life, he told her as they stood beneath the cottonwood tree behind the Fairchild home. Shown me that there's more to living than just surviving, that a man can find home in a person as well as a place. Dahlia's answer was given through happy tears and a kiss that sealed their future together. Their wedding took place that autumn, when the aspen trees turned gold against the blue Colorado sky. The entire town turned out for the occasion, even Mrs. Walsh, who had gradually revised her opinion of Dahlia as the young woman's dressmaking business flourished. Dahlia wore a gown of her own design, ivory satin that emphasized her height rather than attempting to diminish it, with details that celebrated rather than concealed her strong, capable figure. As she walked down the aisle of Pine Creek's small church on her father's arm, murmurs of admiration replaced the whispers that had followed her all her life. Tucker waited at the altar, his face alight with love and pride as he watched his bride approach. Standing together before the minister, they made a striking pair, equally matched in height, in strength, in conviction. Dearly beloved, the minister began, his voice carrying through the packed church. We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other what we all seek: acceptance, admiration, and true partnership. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but spoken with personal meaning that brought tears to many eyes. When Tucker placed a simple gold band alongside his mother's turquoise ring on Dahlia's finger, his hands were steady with certainty. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared, and as Tucker kissed his bride, cheers erupted from the congregation, led by Clementine Walsh, who had become one of Dahlia's staunchest supporters and friends. The celebration afterward was joyous. a community embracing the union of two people who had, in their own way, expanded Pine Creek's understanding of what made a suitable match. Not conformity to arbitrary standards, but compatibility of heart and spirit. "I never thought I'd see the day," Mrs. Hanover remarked to Mrs. Peterson as they watched the newlyweds dance. "But they do make a handsome couple." "They make a perfect couple," Mrs. Peterson corrected. "We were all too short-sighted to see it before Tucker came along." As the sun set on their wedding day, Tucker led Dahlia away from the festivities toward the waiting buggy that would take them to their new home. A comfortable house on the Diamond K's expansion property, close enough to Pine Creek for Dahlia to maintain her growing dressmaking business. "Happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" Tucker asked as he helped her into the buggy. Dahlia smiled, taking in the faces of friends and family who had gathered to wish them well, the same townspeople who had once whispered behind her back, now cheering her happiness. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied, settling beside her husband as he took the reins. As they drove away toward their new life together, Dahlia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A cattle stampede, a broken leg, a spring dance, ordinary events that had combined to create something extraordinary. A love that had not only transformed her life but changed an entire town's perspective. She had been rejected as too big for conventional standards, but in Tucker's eyes, she had always been exactly right. Their love had opened hearts across Pine Creek, proving that true worth could not be measured by appearances or conformity to others' expectations. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, glancing at her pensive expression. Dahlia squeezed his hand, her heart full. "That sometimes the thing that sets us apart is exactly what leads us to where we belong." Tucker smiled, understanding perfectly. "And sometimes a man has to travel halfway across the frontier to find the woman tall enough to stand beside him through whatever life brings." Together they rode toward the setting sun, equal partners embarking on the greatest adventure of all. A shared life built on mutual respect, admiration, and a love that had transformed not only themselves, but an entire community's understanding of what truly mattered.